What happens when a Hall of Famer can't handle the rise of a new star? Sheryl Swoopes' jealousy of Caitlin Clark is turning into a spectacle, and Stephen A. Smith isn't holding back. Stephen A. Smith didn't mince words when he took Sheryl Swoopes to task over her envious take on Caitlin Clark. For those who might not be familiar, Caitlin Clark is no ordinary athlete. She's a game changer. In the world of women's basketball, few have had the kind of impact she's had, both on and off the court. Every time she plays, the buzz is palpable, and records fall like dominoes. But as is often the case with greatness, envy follows close behind. What's surprising, however, is that this envy is coming from a WNBA legend like Sheryl Swoopes. In today's episode of Sport Pulse, we're diving into why Swoopes seems to be the biggest Caitlin Clark hater out there. By the end of this, you'll understand just how deep the animosity runs. Caitlin Clark's rise has been meteoric, to say the least. From her college days to her current WNBA stardom, she has defied expectations at every turn. It's not just about scoring points, it's the way she's redefining the business side of the game. Fans flock to watch her, and she's become a central figure in increasing both attendance and TV viewership for the WNBA. Yet, despite all this, Sheryl Swoopes, a former WNBA great, can't seem to acknowledge Clark's brilliance. Swoopes initially voiced some skepticism about Clark, questioning whether her game would translate to the WNBA. She claimed that Clark was all about volume shooting and doubted her ability to perform at a high level in the professional league. But as the season progressed, Clark didn't just prove her wrong, she shattered records, some of which had stood for decades. To add insult to injury, Swoopes hasn't stopped there. She continues to downplay Clark's accomplishments, even when they are impossible to ignore. For instance, when Indiana Fever climbed the standings, Swoopes gave credit to nearly everyone but Clark, even though Clark was the star point guard leading the charge. Recently, Stephen A. Smith took notice of Swoopes' biased take and called her out for it. He pointed out how Swoopes' refusal to acknowledge Clark's contributions isn't just petty, it's damaging to her own legacy. It's one thing to critique a player, but when the critique is laced with obvious bias, it loses all credibility. And let's be honest, anyone with a decent knowledge of basketball knows that Swoopes is more than capable of recognizing Clark's talent. So why the omission? It's becoming increasingly clear that Swoopes isn't just a skeptic, she's a full-blown hater. Her refusal to give Clark any credit is telling, especially when you consider her stature in the sport. But the more Swoopes tries to undermine Clark, the more she reveals her own insecurity. Let's not forget that Swoopes is a legend in her own right. She's won championships, Olympic gold medals, and is widely regarded as one of the greatest players in the history of the game. But the newer generation of fans might not remember her for her on-court achievements. Instead, they'll remember her as the one who couldn't handle the rise of Caitlin Clark, a once-in-a-generation player. What makes this situation even more puzzling is that Swoopes isn't just ignoring Clark's current success. She's also disregarding the fact that Clark's presence in the league is good for everyone. The WNBA is growing in popularity, and Clark is a significant part of that growth. The more people tune in to watch her play, the more attention the league gets as a whole. If anything, Swoopes should be celebrating Clark's impact, not undermining it. Stephen A. Smith highlighted how Swoopes' attitude is reflective of a broader issue within the league. There seems to be an undercurrent of resentment towards Clark, which is both unfair and unproductive. Instead of embracing the new wave of talent, some in the league appear to be threatened by it. But as Smith pointed out, this kind of behavior only serves to validate the narrative that there are folks in the WNBA who are actively trying to downplay Clark's achievements. Caitlin Clark is here, and she's only going to get better. Her influence on women's basketball is undeniable, and it's about time everyone, including Sheryl Swoopes, starts recognizing that. Clark isn't just a player, she's a movement. She's breaking records, drawing crowds, and elevating the game in ways that few before her have. The WNBA needs more players like her. Players who not only excel on the court but also bring in viewers and grow the sport's popularity. In the end, Sheryl Swoopes has a choice. She can continue to be known as the Caitlin Clark hater, or she can acknowledge the greatness that's right in front of her. If she chooses the former, she risks tarnishing her legacy, not just in the eyes of Clark's fans, but in the eyes of the entire basketball community. After all, if you're not standing with Caitlin Clark at this point, you're standing in the way of progress. So, Sheryl, it's time to put the pettiness aside and give credit where it's due. Caitlin Clark is the future of this league, and the sooner everyone gets on board, the better it will be for women's basketball as a whole. That's it for today's episode of Sport Pulse. Don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth coverage of all things sports. And remember, when it comes to recognizing talent, don't let jealousy cloud your judgment.